Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. That's right, I homeschool. Today we are going to be talking about reading with your preschooler and your homeschool in your family, just reading, which is something that brings me a lot of joy in case you can't tell by my background here. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Before we do, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I have a lot of homeschooling content that's going to be coming out, and I cannot wait to share it with you. So make sure you turn on those notifications so you'll know the moment a video comes out. Okay, so today what I want to do is I want to share with you how we really started this journey with my family to spark a love of reading in our house, which we have. We actually are very fortunate. We have a good, passionate reader on our hands. Not only is my preschooler self-motivating to read right now, but he and his toddler, they both like to pick books all the time. They initiate reading, and it is a very big part of our family. So I wanted to share with you some tips and tricks, what our current routine is in regards to reading. I'm then going to share with you 5 different picture books that we really loved as a family, 5 read-alouds, which are chapter books that my preschooler has loved and has been a big success. And then I'm going to share with you 5 audiobooks that we enjoyed, again, as a family, that, you know, all of these things really help springboard us into this reading-heavy environment that we absolutely love. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is our routine for reading. So our nighttime routine, I would say, is the most solid. This has not changed in a long time. We've been doing this for a while now, but every night we read 4 picture books. We read a chapter from each chapter book, and then we listen to an audiobook. And I know that seems like a lot because it kind of is, but at the end of the day, we all love reading, and so it doesn't feel like a chore. It is something that we've kind of built up to. It started with a single audiobook. I think it started with audiobooks actually. When we were, feeding baby at nighttime, we would listen to an audiobook while doing that, or we'd read out loud from a chapter book. And so it's kind of morphed into this routine that we have now that we absolutely love. Mostly we read shorter picture books at bedtime, and then we have our chapter that we read. Sometimes we read 2 if we get really into it as a family. And then we always read or listen to about 15 minutes of our audiobook while the kids are in bed, and we kind of sit there together as a family and listen. All right. On top of that, I always try during the day to read between 5 and 10 picture books. I'm picking picture books that I want. My kid is picking picture books that he wants, and it's very natural. We just kind of pick these up. I'm not sitting down and I'm regimenting the time that we're spending on this. Sometimes picture books, we read only a couple, but mostly on average, we get about 10 picture books a day, not including our nighttime routine. All right, so that being said, let's talk a little bit about some suggestions, because we do have a lot of favorites and it was really hard to pick. So I wanted to pick with you or share with you 5 picture books that we really loved as a family, but I couldn't pick just 5, so I'm actually going to do 6. So I've got 6 picture books. So the very first book that I want to add or to talk about is called Listen to the Language of the Trees. This book is so fascinating. It talks about how trees communicate through their roots and through the soil, and it talks about like the science of how trees create these relationships with other trees and plants around them, and how they communicate, how they thrive. And it was actually very informative. I had no idea a lot of this stuff, and we loved it. My preschooler was really fascinated by it. We kept talking about it, and even to this day, sometimes when we're outside, he'll make a comment like, "Oh mom, they're communicating through their roots." And it's really cool. It really made us look at trees in a whole different way. Okay, book number 2 is The Great Kapok Tree. This book is, again, it's beautiful. It tells the story of this man who goes to chop down a tree. You have all these animals and creatures talking to him in his sleep, like telling him, well, if you do this, my home is lost. If you do this, this is this consequence. It ends with him dropping his axe and not chopping down the tree, which is beautiful, but it again makes you kind of look at nature as more than just an object that we take for granted. So many people, so many creatures depend on these trees, depend on nature, and it was a beautiful book. I really like it, and this is one that I've seen in a number of curricula options out there, and I totally understand why. Okay, book 3 I fell in love with. It's called A House That Once Was, and this tells the story of a little boy and a little girl who find an abandoned house, and they're wondering and imagining who lived in this house. How did the house become abandoned? And it's told in this beautiful, poetic way. The pictures are sweet. I've always been fascinated by the history of buildings, and this one was just one that really spoke to me. And because I loved it so much, I could tell it kind of resonated with my child a little bit more. And we do sometimes have these conversations where we're like, oh, I wonder what this used to be. What was this building? What was that building? Who do you think lived there? And we've had some really fun, creative conversations, kind of all related to this topic of imagining who came before us in buildings that are now forgotten. All right, the next one we read a lot. It is a bilingual book. It's called The Fabulous Lost and Found, and we have the French and English version. It tells the story of this little mouse who goes to this building in a big city called The Fabulous Lost and Found, and the little mouse only speaks French, and the toads or frogs who run The Fabulous Lost and Found only speak English, and they're trying to understand each other and try to help the mouse find what he's looking for or what she's looking for. It's this whole adventure where they're of miscommunications, and my kids love it. This one is a really fun one. Okay, the next one on my list is called My Voice is a Trumpet. I loved this book. This one is all about using your voice for positive, for good, for standing out, standing up, sticking out, all that fun stuff, and it's beautiful. A huge highlight in this book is they talk about how even silent voices can be heard, should be heard, and they're talking about sign language, and they show that voices aren't always what we hear. Your voice comes from within you, and it was just beautiful. It's not very often that I see sign language represented in literature, kids literature, and I thought that was a beautiful touch. It also has a lot of diversity and inclusion, and it just talks about the importance of doing the right thing, and it is a beautiful book. Okay, and then bonus book, because I couldn't come with just 5, was Octopus Escapes Again. This is another one that we learned a lot from it. We learned about how an octopus has a lot of different methods to survive, and it was really fascinating. I think now, after reading this and then exploring a little bit more with like Blue Planet, octopuses have become one of my favorite animals because they're so darn fascinating. Like, they're just really cool, and this book really sparked this enjoyment. And it also, my child really, he loved it. He was always asking for this one when we had it from the library, and then when we were watching Blue Planet later, he made some connections between the book, and he started predicting almost what the octopus would do. Didn't always get it right, but it was really cool to see that. Okay, now let's talk about 5 read aloud series that I would highly recommend that our preschooler has absolutely loved. So the first one is going to be the Mercy Watson series by Kate DiCamillo. This is the first book. There are 6 books currently in the series. We've read all 6 of them, but number 7 is coming out at the end of December in 2023, and we are so excited to read the next one. These books are perfect transition books from picture books into chapter books. They have these vibrant illustrations, full colored illustrations on every single page, and they're great. The storylines are very simple, so it was very easy. This was like the perfect chapter book transition for my preschooler. It was easy to follow the story. The cast of characters was not too complicated, and they were silly and fun and distinctive, and we really like it. It tells the story of Mercy Watson, who's this little pig, and she goes on, does pig things that result in kind of silly silly consequences, whether they be good or bad or just ridiculous. And we really enjoyed those. The next series I have is very similar. That's going to be Shannon Howell's and Dean Howell's Princess in Black series. This one, again, is full color on every page. It is really fun. And this one tells the story of Princess Magnolia, who is a princess, but she's also a super awesome hero. She likes to fight monsters, keep them in Monsterland, and save the goats. And it's kind of about how her and a bunch of other princesses in disguise save the kingdoms from monsters. They're very silly. They are definitely a huge hit with my preschooler. And the books, this series is still being published as well. So this one has 10 books, I think. Have my notes. Yeah, this one has 10 books. We've read 9. Book 10 just came out last month in April of 2023. So we haven't read that one yet. That's Prince in Pink, I think. And we're really excited to keep on with this series as well. All right, next book series. It's no surprise. Everyone recommends this series, and I see why. And it is Mary Pope Osborne's Magic Treehouse series. So there are 37 books currently in this series, with number 38 coming out in 2023, which is crazy. So these are actively being published still. These are definitely more educational than these first 2 books that I shared with you. They have basically a period in time that Jack and Annie, who are the 2 main characters, they go back in time and they get a snippet into that period of time. So we've read the first 2, which were about dinosaurs and then knights and castles. And the third one about mummies. So you basically get this little snapshot. And a fun thing to do with this is you can create a fact book like Jack does, where he marks down different facts about what he's encountering, and they go into his little fact notebook. So your child can do that along with Jack and Annie, which is pretty neat. Okay, next one I have on my book list here. This is actually from the library, so forgive the paper on it. But this is the Railway series, aka Thomas the Tank Engine. This is a big boy. I didn't realize that the Thomas the Tank Engine books, which are picture books, are actually like sequential stories. I didn't realize that they build off of each other until we found this at the library, and I'm so glad that we did. These tell the story of Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends and their adventures being railway cars. And it is an older book series. And one of the things I love about this, you guys, is one, the pictures are very simple. We do have pictures on every page, like the other ones that I've shown here, but they are a lot of words. And the pictures are pretty simple. They're not like jump in your face, modern day color and all that fun stuff. They're good. But what I really love about this series is because of the time that it was written and the time period it takes place in, is you get a little bit more mature vocabulary. So for example, instead of always saying like this character is mad, they say this character is cross, which I feel like that's not something you really hear these days in the United States. You don't hear people say, oh, I'm feeling so cross. But my toddler does, and my preschooler say it now, all because of Thomas. Now this one is a series of 42 books that were published between 1987 and 2011 by Reverend W. Audrey, I think. Let me see. Yeah, Audrey. And then after he passed, his son Christopher took over the reins. So we have quite a ways to go. We're in the middle of book 10 right now. Yes, middle of book 10. And we are hoping to finish this book out so we can return it to the library here soon. Okay, the last read aloud book that I would recommend is the Dragon Master series by Tracy West. These are definitely more texts, more mature books, but the plot is very captivating for my preschooler. And these basically are fantasy stories. They follow the main character, Drake, who is a dragon master, and it's all about him and his friends going on all these crazy fantasy-inspired quests and adventures, and they're very fun and simple. But what I like about these is they have a very diverse set of characters. All right, last bit of recommendations. I want to talk about audiobooks that we really enjoyed. We have a few. The first audiobook that we really enjoyed as a family is Never Cry Wolf. This was narrated by Adam Sims. I'll put the author's names, like Farley. Anyway, I'm gonna put the actual author's names on the bottom of the screen here. This one I know has some, I guess, disputes or controversy surrounding the validity of a lot of this story, but it doesn't matter. It was a really fun story. My kids loved it, and the narration was amazing. It really kept us captivated, and we really enjoyed it. The next one was How to Train Your Dragon, narrated by David Tennant. And again, this one was really fun. This was meant for a younger audience, but the narration is what really drove this book at home and made it so popular with my preschooler and my husband and I. Like, we really, really loved it. And it was really short. It was only a couple of hours. So something like it wasn't this long, drawn out book. Okay, next one we really loved is Howl's Moving Castle. This was actually our only female narrator. We really liked Jenny Sterlin. I think it's Sterlin. She did a great job narrating this. I really enjoyed it. We ended up listening to the second book in the series as well. Loved her narration style. Not as big of a fan of the second book as we were of the first one, but the first one was really good. It was definitely a fun fantasy read, or listen in this case, and we really enjoyed it. All right, book 4. Okay, you guys, bring out the nerd. We love listening to the What If books, What If 1 and 2, narrated by Will Wheaton, who I absolutely adore as a narrator. I've personally have listened to a lot of his stuff. Love it. I'm a big Will Wheaton fan. But listening to these books have been really fun as a family. They basically they take these absurd hypothetical situations and they use science and physics and all sorts of fun to answer them. We've really enjoyed them, and we're actually listening to What If 2 right now with the kids. So definitely a good recommendation. Will Wheaton is an incredible narrator. Highly, highly recommend him and these books. All right, book 5 is actually not a single book, it's a series, but I really recommend the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings book series that are narrated by Rob Inglis. And I apologize if I said his name incorrectly, but he's a great narrator. He sings in these books whenever they're singing, and he does such a good job. They are the perfect bedtime audiobooks as well if you're doing audiobooks in the evening. And I cannot recommend them enough. These have been probably the books that have been, or audiobooks that have been the most influential as a family and kind of really established and really got us into audiobooks. So definitely recommended. I also have an honorable mention because I couldn't think of my top 5, and that will also be the Harry Potter series, specifically books 1 through 3, because I think those are a little bit less intense than the later books, but I really love the Jim Dale narration. I listened to those a number of times independently, but we did also move into those with my my children. But we also really love the Harry Potter book, the first one in particular, in French. And I don't remember that narrator's name. I'll put it on the screen, but we really, really liked that book as well. It was fun listening to it in French. Ron's voice is very silly in French, and we loved it. Hi everybody, it's Editing Mrs. T here. I have a cat with me, so I apologize. But the last piece of this video that I recorded, I go into a bit of advice that I would recommend and how to establish a happy little reader at home. And I don't mean necessarily someone who has the ability to read. I just mean like a child who has the interest in immersing themselves in stories. As I was going through and editing, I'm like, there are actually 2 other things I really want to mention. So we'll go through that and then we'll hop back to the original video. So the very first thing is, if you want to establish some good, healthy reading and a love of reading at home with your kids, the best thing that I think you can do is to emulate it yourself. If you are someone who is a happy reader already, you love reading, but you don't maybe read very independently in front of them, I highly recommend trying to schedule some independent reading time in front of your kids. That means picking up books that interest you and only you and reading them to yourself quietly while your kids can see you. So maybe they're playing and you just curl up on the couch and you read a couple of books by yourself or a couple of pages. That's really important. If you're someone who's not a big reader, but you really want your kid to be a reader, I highly recommend you also trying to go on your own reading journey to find a book that resonates or a type of book that resonates with you. Oftentimes, the people that I meet that say, I don't like reading, I'm not a big reader, it actually is that, in my mind, it's that they just haven't found a story that they have fallen in love with. And so because they haven't experienced that love, they aren't readers. And until you've discovered that love, I feel like, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. But I recommend you trying to find books that resonate with you. Okay, piece of advice number 2 here. Don't be afraid to DNF or do not finish books with your kids, especially in the early years. It is okay if your child doesn't want to read, Chronicles of Narnia right now, or maybe The Magic Tree House. It's okay. If they have no interest, don't push it. Don't push any of these books. Don't push picture books. Don't push your agenda. Don't push your curriculum books. At this point in time, it's really important that your child be exposed to as much literature as possible. And if it's not resonating with them, don't push it. It's okay if we mark it as a DNF or something you're not finishing for the period of time that you're in. That's okay. They're not going to be at a disadvantage because they're not reading, Pippi Longstocking in preschool. So we just went through this with Tale of Despereaux. We got about halfway through together as a family, and I realized that they weren't asking for the book. They didn't really care what was happening. And so we just stopped. And you know what? They haven't asked about it once, but they have asked about other books, and we've continued reading, and we've had some really engaging conversations in books that they cared about. So I understand that forever you might not be able to DNF books, but now is a good time in these early years. Okay, let's go back to the original video now. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, so those are all of my recommendations. We have really enjoyed reading as a family. Watching my preschooler fall in love with reading has been so rewarding, you guys. And I just want to say one little piece of advice from one book-loving parent to another is the best thing you can do right now with your kids is just to sit with them and read and consume literature. It does not have to be these high-quality classics. You don't have to pick up the books that everybody talks about. Hey, if your kid is into PJ Masks, pick up those PJ Masks books and enjoy them with your child. It's okay that your kid is enjoying maybe not the best quality literature. It's okay. What we want right now is to foster a love of reading, and reality is that love of reading comes when your children connect to stories. So find what connects to your child. All of the stuff I mentioned here might not resonate at all with your kid, and that's okay. You need to find what works really well for your family, for your child. Allow him or her to pick up books from the library. Pick up books that interest you too, and share your interest with your kids. And just read. Enjoy literature. It's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I truly believe that if you can raise a happy reader, you can raise anybody or someone who can learn anything, because you can learn so much through books. All right, well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you very soon. You have a good one. Bye-bye.